People are constantly selling their used PC parts to buy the latest and greatest in today's technology. But what about those that are buying the hardware? At some point the question has to be asked, but can it play Crysis? But for Serial, the big question to be answered is, can you play modern games on older hardware? Let's find out. I recently made a video on how to troubleshoot a PC that isn't properly starting up. That video, which you can find above, covered general tips on how to debug a system, and in that video I was really just documenting myself fixing my brother-in-law's PC. That PC was from 2010, which is 6 years, and in tech time that's more like dog years, or probably even more. Ultimately we decided that it was probably time for him to upgrade, but I still wanted to do some more in-depth testing. Enter in DIY Test Bench 2.0. I pulled together all the parts once more and assembled them into my new test bench, and although I hit a few snags with it ironically not posting again, reseating the RAM fixed my problem and it was time to do some benchmarking. The test system in use features a dual-core, 4-thread i3 550 clocked at 3.2 GHz, coupled with an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 460 and 8GB of Patriot DDR3 RAM. Back in 2010, I'm sure this was a pretty sizable gaming PC, but let's take a look at some of the gaming results given some modern benchmarks. I started off with some synthetic benchmarks, Cinebench, 3D Mark Firestrike, and Unigine Heaven to be exact, and the CPU did fairly well in Cinebench, scoring at 228, which I compared to a later generation of i5. Not bad. The system also got a 3D Mark Firestrike score of 2461, and the graphics card alone scored 2717, with an average FPS of about 12 overall. This isn't great, but it again isn't bad given the age of the hardware. Finally, Unigine Heaven surprised me more than the others, giving the system a score of 750, with an average FPS of about 30. I was surprised with how smooth it ran given the specs, since I ran the benchmark on Ultra, and overall I was impressed with the score. To be fair, synthetic benchmarks are nice, but they aren't enough to help determine the real-life gaming performance of a build, so I queued up 5 games and took note of the frame rates as I played them. The game I play most, though it's not very hardware intensive, Rocket League, was practically flawless, maxing out at 108 frames per second with an average of 90. The lowest it went was 70 frames per second, and you're definitely not getting any complaints from me. To stress the CPU a bit more, I went with City Skylines, which at max settings performed decently well. The FPS bottomed out at 30, but it was able to reach 53 max and overall averaged about 37. While this isn't completely ideal, if this hardware was all you had, it wouldn't take much tweaking to get it at a comfortable 60. That also depends on your preferences, which if this system was in my main rig, I wouldn't mind sacrificing some quality for frames, but it wouldn't necessarily always need a solid 60. Shadow of Mordor was a lot tougher on the PC and took a few tries to get right, but with a fair blend of medium to high settings, it ran 35 frames per second at its lowest, 61 at the top, and it averaged 46 frames per second. Again, this isn't the ideal 60 frames per second, but I found it plenty playable. To really test the extent of the hardware, I loaded up Doom, which represents the most modern of the titles mentioned. Being a AAA title, it definitely held up to the expectations, forcing me to drop the settings down to low to even start to look playable, and when all was said and done, the system only managed to average 30 frames per second. Of course, if you're willing to drop to 900p or even 720p, your frame rates would be better, but I personally would start looking for an upgrade if AAA titles were the aim of my build. Finally, to throw some fun in the mix, I decided to load up a game that was released around the time of this build. And not much to our surprise, even though the frame rate was locked at 60, the maxed out BioShock 2 never dipped below 58 frames per second. Needless to say, at the time of its building, this system was a force to be reckoned with. Overall, I was actually pretty impressed with the results of this testing. I'd imagine someone gaming on this system was in either one of two boats. You have an old system laying around and can't afford a new PC, or you're looking to build but are on a very limited budget. Although I wouldn't necessarily advise going with this set of hardware for a budget build, some quick research showed that you could build this around $200. With that price tag, however, I think you could definitely find some better hardware and build a much more powerful system. Thanks again for watching this video and for helping this channel reach 55 subscribers. It's very encouraging and exciting to see all of your likes and comments, and I'll do my best to continue replying to every single one of them. If you haven't seen part 1 of my dual Xeon workstation, which I call Gladiator, check out the link above. Part 2 will be coming soon, but it's temporarily on hold after my motherboard died. But no worries, thankfully the company I bought it from is sitting at a new one this week, so stay tuned for part 2 of the series, where I'm going to build the system and probably have some pretty sweet footage of the final product. Go ahead and give this video a like if you don't mind, and leave a comment below letting me know if you would consider building a system like this. My Gladiator build is actually using 2 processors released around the same time as this i3, but they literally have 6 times the amount of cores and threads, so I'm really interested to see those benchmarks. Click the subscribe button below for more content like this, and in case you didn't know, I'm Lee from comptv. My Gladiator build is actually using 2 processors that were released about. You guys in there? You guys in there?